Hey, my name's Michael Lauck. I'm a science fiction and fantasy author, and I'm also, well, I have been a Doctor Who fan historically. I am not excited about this new female doctor, however, and I don't think that makes me a bad person, and that's what I'd like to talk to you all about today. Before we get into it, let me just explain. My name's Michael Lauck. I'm a science fiction and fantasy author. I just released a book called The Heist, the first in my Black Sky Ranger series about first responders in space. Check it out on Amazon if you can. Wrote a couple fantasy stories about really inspired by Chinese wuxia novels, which are easiest way to explain it. Instead of traditional fantasy, instead of your Conan and your Game of Thrones or something like that, Lord of the Rings, if you ever wished you could read a kung fu movie, because that's essentially what kung fu movies are, fantasy stories, that's what the Grand Tournament was. So to further establish who I am and where I'm coming from, I'm just about to turn 45, probably am 45 by the time you're seeing this. I'm sitting in my office in front of my, well, not even my full collection, but my Magic DVDs and a bunch of my Magic books. There are more Magic props and books and magazines. Trust me, there's a whole nother shelf just of magazines. There's comic books over there. I mean, that's me. I'm a science fiction and fantasy author, but I'm a science fiction and fantasy fan as well, and hoping to engage with some other fans. That's why I'm doing this. So tell me in the comments why I'm wrong, or if I made you think. And I know there's a million places for sci-fi and fantasy fans to kind of have their discussions. I don't know that I felt that there's a place for me, for my age, for my viewpoints. So that's what I'm hoping to do here. And if you check out my books, that's great too. Like I said, feel free, comments down. Tell me why I'm right. Tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me what you think, because that's really what I want to do. Is I want to talk. I want to know what people think. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm saying I'm not evil for the way I feel. Okay, and I'm not saying you're wrong if you're excited about a female Doctor Who. But you're not a better person because you're excited about a female Doctor Who. We're fans, and we should be allowed to have opinions about these things. And so let's get right into it. I don't mind, and I wanted to, let me just say, this is not the way I wanted to start my YouTube talks here, shooting on a laptop in my messy office, but I wanted to get this out before time went on much more. So that being said, excuse the mess, excuse what's probably crappy audio and worse video, and let's get into it. I've shot this like twice, and I just go on and on like am right now. So I'm going to try to be succinct, and I'm going to try to get at my point and explain it this way. I am all for strong females in science fiction and other things. I have daughters. I don't see lines between men and women being hard and absolute. I think there are great comic book superhero characters that are women. I think there are great characters in science fiction that are women and fantasy that are women. I think girls can enjoy science fiction and fantasy and be engineers. I'm going to throw that out there and write science fiction and fantasy and do a damn fine job of it. I'm very excited about this female-led Star Trek series coming out, Discovery. If they ever actually get it on, that's a whole nother issue. Little confused about the Klingons, but that again is probably something else. Loved Voyager. Loved. Janeway is maybe my favorite captain. Voyager isn't necessarily my favorite series, but Janeway might be my favorite captain. That man, Kate Mulgrew, great actress, just awesome, all around awesome. But here's my problem with the female Doctor Who. I have been struggling to force myself to watch the show the last couple of seasons. It feels to me like it's been very caught up with being cool and kind of enjoying a wider popularity as kind of nerd culture, for the term that's being thrown around, is currently popular. And I can get you want to explore certain themes and topics and different, breaking with the continuity and rules of the universe as set up by the show. To me now that just feels cheap, and it feels like it's a kind of a fan service, kind of a circus stunt kind of a move. And I feel that way partially because, like I said, last couple of years, I just have to force myself to watch the show. It's not the show, as I grew up and loving. Take on social issues, do it, but don't turn the Doctor into a female. Now, you could turn the Doctor into a female and not break the rules of the show. I would argue there are probably ways to do it. You could have the Doctor disappear so someone else, a regeneration of his granddaughter, or Romana steps into his mantle and is the Doctor as far as while she searches for the Doctor, or just tries to replace him because he's gone. That would be a possibility. I'm not saying that's what they should do, and I'm not saying that that's what they are doing. For all I know, that's what they are doing because I'm not watching the show anymore. But to set up those last few years, oh yeah, Time Lords can turn into to change sex. That was never mentioned before. Never were they looking for a woman when the Doctor was a fugitive. Never when they in the Five Doctors where they go and they meet Rassilon and he's got the secret to infinite regeneration and all that. Do they mention which basically implies, by the way, that regeneration has a technology built into them that's a possibility. I mean, the closest they come is that ridiculous regeneration scene because Romana it has been explained in other sources as one of the rare Time Lords who has the ability to control her own regeneration. And that led to a relatively silly scene that I think is probably best ignored by everyone forever. Which, I gotta say, I love Mary Tam as Romana, and I love Lalla Ward as Romana. I think Romana's a great character. I think there's room for another female, character like that. I think the old Doctor Who had some strong female characters. It had its issues. I am not gonna say that it didn't have its issues. Leela was an interesting character in that here's the Doctor and he's intellectual and could be capable. He wasn't an old man, but he is more of a pacifist. And then you have her being this kind of primitive huntress, in perhaps an unfortunate outfit. I won't defend that, but I thought that was a great juxtaposition, which Big Finish, who create the audio adventures of Doctor Who, have been exploring, in the past few years. Love some of their work with the classic series. Like I said, there's room for improvement. Sarah Jane I thought was a strong character, a favorite of my daughter's. I know, and very excited when she had her own series. And granted, it was a kids show, but where she kind of stepped into that Doctor mantle, and she was the one who had been around the alien invasions a time or two. I think there's room to explore gender roles without changing the Doctor into a woman, which they've been teasing and setting up for a long time. Just like I don't think that they've said at times, well, maybe we'll do a movie where James Bond is black, or what if James Bond was a woman? And it's like, well, but those books are not written with him being a black man or a woman, or in the modern times. And I say there is room for a modern James Bond-like character, but not who is black or a woman, but not James Bond. I don't think James Bond belongs in the here and now. I think if you're going to make James Bond movies, make James Bond movies be set when those books were written. I don't like the modern takes on Sherlock Holmes, where they put Sherlock or Elementary, where it's Sherlock Holmes in the modern world. To me, those don't make sense. You can do something like that without changing the character. And a perfect example comes from Sherlock Holmes, and that's House. That modernized the Sherlock Holmes character by creating a character like Sherlock Holmes, who was not Sherlock Holmes, but fit in the modern world and fit in a realm where he could solve mysteries but would not be at odds with the police, because obviously in the real world the police would not put up with a talented amateur consultant. No, that ain't happening. No, that guy's going to jail. That's what would happen there. And House, which is Sherlock Holmes in a medical center, great show. Hate mysteries, hate medical shows. Loved House. Hugh Laurie was edgy. It was a brilliant concept. It is so much better than Sherlock or Elementary, and I think just because you do something bold doesn't necessarily mean it's clever or even creative or necessary. And that's what kind of takes me down to, I've been watching Doctor Who since I was in 7th grade. Here in America, in St. Louis, where I grew up, Doctor Who was on PBS in America. Some places played it in the original episodes, like every day or every week. Some places played these kind of omnibus episodes where they would take the entire story and shove it together and cut out all the beginning and end credits except for the first set and the last set and show it like a mini movie. And that's what they did in St. Louis on KETC PBS 9, where Doctor Who was on at best at 10:30 on a Sunday night. And if Masterpiece Theater was long because it did a full Shakespearean drama, well, Doctor Who started even later. And that's how I got introduced and grew up with Doctor Who. I can tell you, my first episode was The Brain of Morbius when I was in 7th grade. Watched it because the girl who sat in front of me in drama, who I'm pretty sure I still know her name, but I'm going to leave it out, had a crush on her and wanted to see what she was into. I'd heard of Doctor Who but never watched it. Watched The Brain of Morbius. Hooked. What a great show. What a great character. This kind of non-violent, thinking, Oscar Wilde-esque wit who's, running around saving the universe. Brilliant show. Along the years, though, it's set up that how regeneration works, and turning into a woman really hasn't ever been mentioned until recently. And again, what I feel like is it's being done more for shock value and fan service than anything else. I'm not saying that the actress who's taking over the role isn't going to be good, or that she's not a talented actress. I'm just saying that, don't break the rules of your own universe. It always leads to trouble. That's the weakness of Enterprise in the Star Trek series. That's the problem of many things when you go and you can't pay attention to your own show. You're creating a new show when you're changing rules. And you know what? There's room for that too. I'm a big fan of the Japanese creator Leiji Matsumoto. I'm probably murdering that name, and I apologize. I do not speak Japanese. I speak Mandarin Chinese, but not Japanese, and there's no overlap there. But if you're not familiar with him, he created Captain Harlock, one of the greatest manga and then anime characters ever, or Japanimation if you're old like me. And one of the things he does is when he tells new Captain Harlock stories, the only thing that's constant is Captain Harlock as a character. And it could be that perhaps Earth has lost this war, and Captain Harlock was a pilot, or was a captain in the Earth space fleet who refuses to surrender. Or it could be that Earth won the war, but it's oppressive, and he has refused to be a part of it. Why he becomes a space pirate changes with almost every story, because Matsumoto says it's my story, and I want to tell stories with Captain Harlock, and they don't need to be the same universe. It's I want to see what Captain Harlock does in different. That's brilliant. But that's not Doctor Who. That's not how it was set up. So since the show has already been losing me the last couple of years, and watching it has become a chore, to then say, oh hey, thanks for investing so much of your life, 30-something years watching this show and catching up and seeing basically every episode up to the last 2 seasons ever produced. We're running out of ideas, so we're going to just change the rules on you. That's what this feels like to me. If they had me riveted every week and I couldn't wait to see the next Doctor Who, then bringing on a female doctor might have me excited. But that's not where I am anymore. And like I said, this feels like a cheap stunt. Especially since, as they say, oh, it's so bold and it's so cutting. Well, you know what? Look to Marvel Comics. There's who's not been a female? Thor, Iron Man, Captain America. Look to Star Trek already saying we're going to have a female lead character, and having already done a female captain in a previous series years ago. Look to Big Finish. And if you're a Doctor Who fan and you haven't checked out the Big Finish audios, they do audio stories based on Doctor Who. The BBC plays on has played on BBC, was Radio 4, now I think it's Radio 7. Their stories have been mentioned in Doctor Who BBC television things. When they did the short going up to the 50th with Paul McGann's Doctor and showing how he kind of went out, he mentions characters from the Big Finish audio stories. So if you ever wanted more of that 8th Doctor, there's a couple series that Big Finish has done. They're doing this really cool thing now, the last few years, where they're doing new adventures for the older Doctors, including like Tom Baker. It still does the 4th Doctor. I mean, he's a much older gentleman, but his voice is still there. So he has new adventures with Leela and the Romanas. Great stuff. Heartily suggest you check out Big Finish. I'll try to put a link in this to their website. They have a series called Doctor Who Unbound, which is kind of like Marvel's What If. It's funny I keep referencing Marvel because I'm more of a DC fan, but. Anyway, if you're familiar with the What If series, it's like taking that character and changing the world they're in, or changing some pivotal thing. Kind of like Leiji Matsumoto saying, hey, the character remains the same, the universe he's in is changing with Captain Harlock. That's what If stories were. And they did this series, Doctor Who Unbound, which changed things. They did a female Doctor already. So it's not, and that was a few years ago. It's not that cutting edge of an idea. So, I'm not evil. I'm all for strong women in science fiction. I'm all for strong women in real life. Strong fiction and fantasy too. I'm gonna throw that in. I know some fantasy people get upset because they're just fantasy people in sci-fi. All of you. I am all for that. But seeing this, to me, seeing Doctor Who become a woman, just underscores where the direction of the show has been lost, and that's how I feel. So I hope you understand now that I'm not a terrible person. I'm not anti-woman. I'm not, I'm not trying to trample anybody's rights, anything like that. It's just another marker at the show going downhill, and that's how I feel. And I care because I love Doctor Who. I'm a fan. I still watch old Doctor Who's all the time. All the time. I've got a big stack of Doctor Who. I should have put those behind me, huh? But I wanted to get this out before things went too far, and it wasn't a relevant topic anymore. We're coming up on the 20-minute mark. That is way longer than I should have rambled along. So let me just say, I'm Michael Lauck. Thanks for listening. Put, comments down below. I'm not going to censor comments. I'm sure I'm going to take a lot of crap for this, probably from a lot of people who didn't actually listen to what I had to say. But I want to hear, your point of view. I want to hear, hey, this is why you're right, or this is why you're wrong, but it really does all kind of boil down to, I don't think the show's been very good lately, and that's my opinion. And so I don't trust them to do this. And that's, in a nutshell, what I'm saying. So anyway, comment down below if you get a chance. Check out some of my books, either on Amazon, look me up, Michael Lauck, Lauck, or go to my website, swordsandrayguns.com. I got free stuff over there, stories you can download and all that kind of good stuff. Thanks for listening, and I hope that you actually join my offer and pick up the conversation below. Oh, hey, you know what? You can also go to swordsandrayguns.com, and there should be email links there. You can email me too. I will try to answer all the emails I can, because I want to talk to you all. I want to hear what you have to say. That's why I am here. Thanks for listening to what I have to say, especially as it rambled on and on. You have a great day. You keep loving what you love and defending what you want to defend, and we'll talk again soon about something else. Hopefully, maybe not so divisive.